Hi, and welcome to Google Apps Unscripted. My name is Eric Kalita. I'm a member of the Google Developer Relations team here working on AppScript. And with us today, Christian Moscardi.
Yep.
How you say it?
Yep, that's correct.
Great. He's an intern working on our team for the summer, helping us out, getting AppScript, making it even more awesome for everybody. Christian, you want to give us a little bit of background, I guess, about maybe who you are, where you come from?
Sure. Well, I go to Columbia University during the year. I'm going to be a senior this coming fall. And yeah, I'm here on the developer relations team, specifically with AppScript for the summer, working on that, working on ultimately some code samples that will be pushed out in the near future.
Yeah, I mean, one of the pieces of feedback we get a lot is that it really helps to have complete sample code, kind of a whole application. We try to put a lot of little samples in our docs, a little bit of reference documentation or perhaps little snippets just kind of throughout our documentation to kind of give you an idea about how to use a very specific function or feature. But people like to see a larger kind of end-to-end application, something that covers more of the use cases that they're used to. And so it's great to have you here helping out with that.
Yeah, it's great to be here. It's been a great experience so far. I'm excited to be working on what I'm doing. So yeah.
He was not obligated to say that. The intention.
Not at all.
All right. Well, we have a ton to cover today, as well as getting to your questions. If this is your first time joining us for Google Apps Unscripted, there's two ways you can ask questions. One is to join the Hangout link, which is I just posted to the event page on Google Plus for this event, as well as the page on Google Google Developers Live event page. We have two different pages where you can access the Hangout link. So you can either join us via the Hangout, or as you can see,
the link is down here.
Actually, it's up at the top, but it may not have been there when you loaded the page.
It'll
be there now. But there's also then on this page, there it is, join this Hangout. So you can join there, and we'll take your live questions later on in the show. Or you can ask via the moderator, the Google moderator that's embedded just below the event here, and ask your questions if you don't have a webcam or you don't feel like getting on air. We got some questions already trickling in, and we'll get to those later on in the show. But first, let's talk about some recent news. So I think the big one here is on the blog. We just published a blog post, and I mean just as in literally right before we went on the air.
Yeah.
We published this blog post. We're happy to announce that there is a new feature available in Google AppScript. It's the ability to access the cursor and selection of the active user within a Google Doc document. So at Google I/O this year, one of the big things we launched was the ability to write scripts inside of Google Docs. And we've seen people kind of jump on board and start playing with that. But right away, they're like, I really need to get more interaction. I need to know what the user is doing, where they are in the document, what they have selected. And that's something that we really knew people were going to want, but we had to put the kind of the finishing touches on it. So it didn't quite make it for I/O. But it's out now, and I think we're really happy with how it turned out. And so this blog post links off to some of the various reference documentation around the cursor and selection object. But I think even more fun than looking at some documentation would be looking at some examples. So we published 3 different examples on this blog post. Do you want to lead us through the first one, Christian?
Yeah, sure. It's really simple, very straightforward, just showing off how you can select a block of text, say, and then in this particular script, it's very simple. Translate it from English into Spanish, so it assumes English text and translates it into Spanish. But you can imagine it's very easy to change those parameters to whatever languages you want. So this is the document here, and let's say I want to take this block of text, automate workflows such as a document or expense approvals, order fulfillment, time tracking, and more. I wonder how you say that in Spanish. Oh, look at that. And there it is, translated nicely into Spanish for you.
Yeah, so I think we added a custom menu item, which is something that you could do at I/O. But now, rather than just try to find some text or do some manipulation, you now know what's in the selection, and that's what makes this possible. So that's a pretty cool one. Now, if you are also familiar with what we did at I/O this year, you may recognize the term Bibstro or Bibstro, depending upon how you choose to pronounce it, which is the sample app that was built.
This one is way cool.
Yeah, built by one of our engineers and Jonathan, and this sample app allows you to do really kind of complex bibliography management within a Google Doc. Now, people have been clamoring for the source code as soon as we were there at I/O, and so we released the source code today, and we'll show you where that all is later. And we've also now, with that, added in the ability for cursor and selection manipulation. So now you can use your selection to help define, or your cursor to help define bibliographies sources.
Yeah, so we have the doc's open here, and the resolution's a little bit off, it looks like. Normally, your sidebar over here won't like take up a solid third of your screen.
Yeah.
But this just lets you manage all the sources that you've added in, and from there update ultimately your bibliography. And then the selection feature I think that's been added in is, for example, if I highlight this selection here and realize, oh, I need to cite this clause, I would then go in and say add inline citation, which should pop up a menu. Yep, here it goes, which will allow me to pick one of the sources that I've added in. So clearly this is from Donald Knuth, and I cited. And then there are a couple other options in here for specific bibliography things. Oh, can I not reach the bottom?
Probably not in this resolution.
Again, this won't happen on pretty much any normal resolution.
But that's something we should look into for sure.
Yeah, totally. But in any event, if I could get down there, I would then maybe if I drag this up a little bit.
Getting into dangerous territory now.
Yeah.
I think you get the point there. And so it basically is using that selection and then right in place adding in the appropriate citation.
I hit enter? No, that just closed it out.
It's a good effort though. So I think this is people have been really wanting to play around with this, and now that the source code's out there, you can do that. And with that extra, like when we showed it at I/O, it didn't have the selection capability, but I think that's something that really makes it that much more useful to really quickly just drag some text and say, cite this. I'm sure in school this would be extremely useful.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like this is something we've been brainstorming sort of samples that I could write, and this is actually one of the things that came up when I was thinking, oh, what can you do with a sidebar in Google Docs? Oh, totally, like a reference or citation manager is something that I know I would absolutely want writing papers, and a lot of my friends at school would absolutely be interested in this as well. So
very cool.
Yeah.
All right, and so then the third example that we have here, this one is a little bit more a tool for you as a developer and less so something that you would use in the wild. So it's called Cursor Inspector. What essentially it does is it gives you a sidebar that allows you to get live updating information about what the current state of your cursor and selection is. So it's actually pretty challenging to represent a cursor and a selection in a document model like the one that we have in Google Docs. And in the document app. So we put a lot of time and effort into making it clear, but we still think it'd be helpful to have this tool to give you a little bit more information about when you do make a selection, what are you expecting to get back? And when you have placed your cursor somewhere, what do you expect to see? And so it's basically just a simple tool where you can go take this doc, throw in some images, throw in some drawings, throw in table of contents, and just move your cursor around the screen, kind of see how the data changes, select some things, see how the data changes, and that'll help, we hope, guide your development efforts when you use this feature in your own products.
Yeah. So again, here's that doc, and you see, we've got the sidebar open on the side. That's popped up from this menu here, where you just hit show sidebar, and then that comes up. And then, so right now, I'll just click here. Right now, I'm looking, this is a cursor, right? I don't have anything selected. So you see, the offset from the beginning of the paragraph that we're in, and what type of element we're looking at there. And then if I go ahead and highlight this whole block here, we move down to the selection, and we see, the type of element that the selection is in, whether or not it's partial. I have selected the full paragraph here by doing that double click. So you see that partial is set to false, and then indices on where that selection happens if it is partial. So with this partial selection, you see the start and ending indices within the paragraph. So
yeah. So yeah, just a simple little tool, but it kind of hopefully get you up and running sooner with cursor and selection. So. We'll probably do maybe another GDL someday that goes deeper into cursors and selections. But for now, I think that's a great way to kind of get started. Check out the blog posts, start playing around with some of these samples. Go from there.
Totally. And in addition to that, you can actually grab all the source code. Of course, you can go into the script editor here and pop open the source code and modify it within the doc. But we also have this all up on GitHub, and that link is again in the blog post, and that's here. So I had the cursor inspector open in particular, but
there's also Bibstro as well.
Yep. So Bibstro and the cursor inspector are here in GitHub with a little bit of README, and you can grab all that code from here too.
Yeah, so we're just trying to make more of the sample code available and in a place where you can always find it. Sometimes, we'll publish this doc and you can grab the code from there, but maybe you'll lose track of that. So hopefully we're planning to add even more samples as we build them into this Google AppScript samples repository. And so keep an eye on that. You might want to bookmark it for the future.
Yeah.
All right, great. So that was a little section on cursor and selection. Just to comb through some other news you may have missed since our last Google Apps Unscripted. A bunch of other recent blog posts that we put out. One is that there's a new version of Flubaroo out. Flubaroo is the
super cool
and hilariously named script.
Yes, yeah. The name is. Where did the name come from?
I have no idea what that means. I'll have to ask someday. But it's a very popular app script that teachers have been using to do grading via forms. And Dave, he's actually a Googler who does this just on the side. It's not his main job. He just loves AppScript and helping out teachers. He put out a brand new version that has some new features involved, some new features that he listed there, and we think teachers are really gonna love it.
Yeah, I think so as well. I mean, I'm a student, but
more quizzes.
Yeah, I've been a TA as well, and grading is one of the in fact, the most frustrating part of that job. So I can only imagine that as a teacher, it's quite similar. I don't think anyone really wants to grade. So anything that makes that process easier can only be a good thing. Especially, I guess now that it's at version 3 and pretty polished and all that.
It's pretty exciting. All right, cool. And then we've had 2 other blog posts recently kind of highlighting what some people are doing with AppScript. So one is here a domain administrator who was tired of creating groups within his Google Apps domain for people who wanted them. And so rather than kind of just keep fielding emails from requests from people, he actually made a system using AppScript that allows users themselves to basically apply labels to threads, and then he'll automatically find those threads and then create a new domain group with all the people in that thread. So it's kind of a really simple way where it's like, you started a conversation with a bunch of people. You're like, you know what? We're constantly adding these same 5 people to this same list. Let's just create a group. So it kind of takes the admin out of the picture. Yeah. So that's one thing. And then the other one down there is shipping tracking. So someone who runs a small jewelry business, I believe, and needs to keep track of all the shipments.
Yeah, and that's cool. I would consider setting up something like this for my Amazon orders, let alone my jewelry shipments. It's way cool. So I think what he did was he basically looked in his Gmail inbox for these particular shipping emails, pushed those out to a package tracking service, and from there, from that site, he was able to basically just look at see where all the packages were. The tricky part was getting the tracking info from those emails to the shipping service, and with just a quick little Google Apps script, he was able to make that happen with it looks like very little code.
It's the kind of thing. It's like he's not using AppScript as a language to do kind of complex geospatial tracking, but it's a really great integration platform. There's an existing service that allows you to get this tracking information. So all he needed to do was pull it out of one place and put it into another place. And sometimes AppScript is that perfect glue to get that job done. Do check out our blog from time to time. We have some great posts there that show you hopefully things that can inspire you about what you can do with AppScript, as well as news about new features that come out. So something else that I wanted to touch on was we just launched a feature recently, and we did a whole GDL episode on it that you may have missed on importing and exporting Google Apps scripts. So the Drive SDK is a separate API that allows you to access files from your drive. And it has the ability to, download data from your drive, upload data to your drive, etc. Well, we recently enhanced it to provide the ability to do import and export of your Google Apps script as well.
Is that here?
Yeah. So if you go to our videos section, you can see right at the top there is AppScript Crash Course on import and export. But if you want to see the documentation itself, just go back to our site, and then it's under the development environment.
There it is. Yep.
And then in there we have a link for importing and exporting projects. So Arun, one of our colleagues, put together a whole bunch of great documentation, and he's going to add even more samples, hopefully, showing you essentially how you can use the Drive SDK to do this kind of import and export of AppScript projects. It's a little bit more complicated because you're now writing code against a different API, and you're doing it on your own local machine. So if you're just used to writing AppScript code, this is going to be a little bit different. You may have to use Python or Java or Ruby. Whatever. I mean, you can use a lot of different languages with the Drive SDK, but it's going to set up an environment, a server. It could be a bit more complicated. But that said, we think it really opens up a lot of cool doors for people who want to maybe edit their code offline or download it so that they can check it into a version control system. There's a lot of different possibilities here, and we're excited to see what people build. And actually, I think just today I saw that one of our users on the on one of the Google AppScript Google Plus communities actually built an AppScript library for importing and exporting AppScript code.
Oh, awesome!
So you can now.
That's funny.
Yeah, it's the very inception.
Yeah, meta.
Yeah, so you can now use AppScript to export AppScript. Pretty crazy stuff. So we hope that you check out the GDL where they go into a lot more detail about how this all works, or just check out the documentation.
Yeah, it looks like it's pretty thorough here and pretty good.
Cool. And then one other GDL that we did recently was one about the script editor, kind of like tips and tricks. So if when you write AppScript code, it's all in your browser, and we have an online editor. And there's a lot of little features in there that you might not know about. Some keyboard shortcuts, some sort of advanced features. So go to our Google Developers Live page, go to or the YouTube channel there on the bottom, and you can find that episode as well.
Yeah, you want to catch up on the older episodes here, and I thought that was a super cool one because I love keyboard shortcuts and just kind of being on the keyboard. And yeah, actually, in terms of importing and exporting scripts, I would love to see a Vim extension to just keeping in with the whole keyboard thing. But yeah, that one I learned a ton from that about the AppScript IDE and just ways to improve your workflow, move a little bit more quickly through the code that you're writing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we all have other things to do, so
yeah.
getting a little bit more, squeezing out a little bit more time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Certainly helps. Very cool. And so then lastly, before we jump into questions, I just want to take a quick pass through our release notes to kind of catch you up on some important items you may have missed. So for big announcements like brand new features, cursor and selection, we'll post those on the blog. But we're constantly, on a week-by-week basis, introducing fixes to bugs or small new features. And our release notes page is where you can find out kind of like what's changed. It's linked off the bottom of our homepage again, and it's a great thing to kind of check on from time to time to kind of see if there's something new you can take advantage of, or maybe a bug that was holding you up has now been fixed. So the list is long. We've done quite a number of things since our last episode, but just to highlight a few of them, one of the ones that I know people are asking for was commenter abilities in the Drive service, specifically around Google Docs. So the Google Docs model allows you to be a viewer, an editor, an owner, but also a commenter. The ability to, you can view it, but you can also add comments. And it's kind of like somewhere in between view and edit access. And we didn't have that ability to add that via the AppScript code. You could only do it via the UI. And now we can do it via AppScript too. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, for setting up scripts, or maybe you want to take a document you have and email it out to a list and say, hey guys, can you review? You want to automatically give all those reviewers commenter access.
Right. You can totally put a script together for a list of reviewers, pushing that out. They become commenters, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that'd be pretty cool. And then one of the things that's been on our plate for a long time now, where we finally got to it, was making it so that when you send email via Gmail app, the emails you send appear in your sent folder. So a lot of people, they were using AppScript to send out emails, but then they were kind of never really clear. Was it sent? What did the text actually say in the end? Who were the actual recipients? You could do some logging, but it'd just be better that if an email came from your account, you could see it in your sent folder.
Right.
When that person replied, it would be threaded nicely.
Right.
So that was something that people really wanted, and we just recently added that in.
Were you able to see it in your Gmail previously, or was it just not there?
Just not even there. Yeah.
Okay. And if someone replied, would it then pop back into your inbox, or how?
I believe it just was as if you'd see it as if you had never gotten the email,
Gotcha.
and so you'd have it
a new thing
bracketed in at the bottom.
Well, that's cool that it's now in the great Gmail UI and all that. So.
Yeah. So those are some cool things. Likewise, if we keep going down a little bit into June. I think some of those ones, it's just some small changes to the way some things work. But I think in the June 3rd, there was one more I wanted to highlight.
Sure.
And that was the first one there. So when you would run a script previously, it would say running script and then the name of the script, and then it would say, script finished. And sometimes what that was doing was taking kind of like the internal names in your code and showing them to the people running your script, which maybe weren't always the coders.
Right.
And it just gets a little confusing. So we've now, just for simplicity's sake, removed that little piece of text, the function name, from that little notification that comes when you start a script, just so it says, I'm running a script and I'm done running a script.
Right. Yeah, and I can imagine that'll make the lives of people, using these scripts a little bit easier.
So it's a little less confusing.
Yeah,
You're like, wait, I'm running what now? Yeah. So feel free to poke around the release notes and go into more detail. It's a great way to stay up to date on all these little changes.
Very cool. Yeah, and there's a lot of them.
Gotcha. All right. So let's just keep going then.
Right.
So let's get into question and answer now. So I don't know if we have anybody live on the Hangout. Let's check in. Hello on the Hangout. Any questions? Not hearing anything. No?
All right.
Well, so feel free to hang around. If you have a question, chime in, and we'll feel free to get to it.
Yeah, we've got a couple in the moderator.
So let's go. So we do have some questions on the Google moderator that we had set up earlier. So let's take a look at those. So we have here, let's start from the top. We got it up there?
Sure.
All right. So any news about improvements on the AppScript IDE? Any plans for a plugin with IntelliJ or Eclipse? Well, so as we just mentioned, we did do a whole show about the AppScript IDE, so you can, maybe there's an improvement that you didn't even know about.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's been sitting there the whole time.
Those keyboard shortcuts, let me tell you, they're great.
And I think the other thing is that we don't have any immediate plans to launch plugins for editors, but with the ability to use the Drive SDK to do import and export, there's nothing stopping an enterprising person,
developer,
an enterprise developer to build their own, integration with their favorite. So you said you're interested in Vim.
Yeah, I'm a Vim fan.
Yeah, it could be a weekend project for you to spin up a Vim plugin. So I think if there are IDEs that people really love and would love to do AppScript code in, I would say to start, maybe just see if you can self-organize. Like check out the Google Plus community, see if you can get some other people maybe to contribute, and then go from there.
Yeah, I know. I'd love to see those. I just think those plugins would be really cool, and being able to edit offline like that would be a cool thing. Again, that being said, I think the AppScript IDE is very solid. With the auto completion that's there, it's a really great way to write AppScript code, because you don't have to worry too much about the referencing back for specific libraries. You can just hit Control Space and see find the function that you're sort of looking for.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's one of the issues that if you do go out and build one of these plugins, you're going to find that how are you going to do autocomplete, right? And then how are you going to run your code? The code runs all on the cloud, right? You can't really run it locally. So I think having offline edit access could be useful in a lot of scenarios, it's probably not going to be as a rich or a completed experience as using the online IDE. All right, great. So next up, can I edit the navigation bar from a Google site using AppScript? So the answer, I think, is unfortunately no today. The navigation bar, I guess it depends on what that means. At least most of the Google sites I've used, the pages in your site are just automatically reflected in a left-hand sidebar. So you could add a new page or move a page around, I believe via the Sites app, which would then influence the left bar. But if you're talking about like a bar at the top or like the menu bar when you're doing editing, unfortunately that today cannot be manipulated via the Sites app. For instance, you can add a new menu to the Google Docs menu bar, but you can't do it on the menu bar in Google Sites. So if you, I guess if that didn't answer your question, you can follow up with us offline. Maybe just reach out to me on Google Plus, and I can give you some more information.
Okay. Yeah.
Great. So next up, can I edit and create a form on the fly with AppScript? Well, yes, you can. Is the short answer. So this was actually the subject of my talk at Google I/O this year.
Yeah, I watched that one. That was really cool.
Yeah. And so that was the ability to do Google Forms manipulation via the Forms app. So it's a whole new service in Google AppScript that allows you to not just manipulate or read the contents of a form, but actually even create new forms on the fly. So one of the things I demoed was the ability to use a Google form to create a Google form. So I would fill out one form, And then when I filled it out, an app script would run that would trigger and create a brand new form and then send that out again.
It was for quiz generation, is that right?
It was, yeah.
You could specify your quiz questions, and then it would, spit out the nice quiz as a Google form, right?
Right, yeah. So I think FluBrew is probably a bit more robust and made for longer quizzes.
Right.
The one here that I was focusing on was something where, you just taught a subject, you're like, I really love to know if kids got it. You just type one quick question, hit send, it goes to the whole class. They fill out the answer, you get all the responses. It's like a 5-minute process. And so it was using forms to create forms. So it's definitely possible to create forms with AppScript, and we think it actually can lead to some really cool things.
Yeah, and it sounds like definitely on the fly if you can just, get it running that quickly. So.
Yeah, great. And the other one here we have is any new, we already answered that one about the ID. All right, great. So let's check back in on the Hangout and see if anybody there. No one's there. All right. Well, that's all the questions we have here on the moderator. I'm just gonna check Google Plus as well. And let's see if we have any comments here that are interesting. It looks like we did have some problems with the live stream today,
right? Yeah.
So we apologize for that. If you were watching live or you didn't get a chance to, I'm sorry about that. So we will post this recording, and if you're hearing me say this, you are watching the recording. So yeah, I don't see any other comments. And how about Christian? Do you have anything else to add you'd like to say before we say goodbye?
No, not really. I think, I mean, it's just as someone who's like really come into AppScript for the first time, it's been very cool. Over the past, I guess, month or so, it's been very cool learning all the different features and hearing things. But feedback from the developers. It's very easy for me to ask questions, but because I've got Eric here and the rest of the team sitting across from me. But I know I've had a ton of questions, and I think getting involved, reaching out when you're a bit confused is definitely a good thing to do. Having been there myself.
And yeah, so if you do have questions, coming to these apps Unscripted is a great way to get them answered. But we only do them about once a month. So in the meantime, we have a support page on our website you can check out. And we basically say if you're asking a very technical question, a detailed question, we have a Stack Overflow tag where a lot of people go there and ask questions and have some really great answers. So recommend using Stack Overflow. And if you have a broad question, you just want to know generally, can I do something? Generally, what's the best way to do something? We recommend maybe looking at some Google Plus communities that are out there for Google AppScript, where there are some really dedicated, passionate users who have a lot of good experience as well.
Yeah, like that education one seems pretty active and very cool. So.
Yeah, a whole community just on AppScript for education. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Great. All right. Well, with that, I think we're going to wrap it up for today. Thanks everybody who tuned in or failed to tune in but is watching it now, and we'll hopefully work out all the kinks for our next episode. Once again, my name's Eric.
And I'm Christian.
And we'll see you next time. Right. Bye.
Are we?